Welcome to Biztech's Technology Show, where we feature tech companies that are innovating and transforming the technology landscape. Today, we're doing a take on digital advertising and the related technology behind it. Digital marketing is perceived by many as a kind of black art, but we're going to take a deep dive into aspects of digital marketing and demystify them a little bit. Now, to do this, we have Daniel Henriksen. He's the head of outcome and media planning at Xaxis. Xaxis is GroupM's outcome media specialist, which seeks to transform digital media into business outcome. Xaxis has delivered outcomes to more than 3,000 brands in 48 markets around the world. Now, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Now, Daniel, please give us an overview of what Xaxis does.
Yeah, so I think you said it very well. So we are the advanced programmatic media arm of GroupM, and we're delivering business outcomes for more than 3,000 brands around 48 markets around the world, and especially Asia Pacific, where we are based. So really, I think of Xaxis as a group within GroupM comprising of data scientists, engineers, as well as marketing experts that really works with cutting-edge technology such as machine learning and AI optimization solutions to deliver better value and outcomes to all of the brands and the companies that we work with on a global scale to make sure that they get the most value of their digital media investments. And of course, through that, by making smarter and faster decisions using programmatic buying, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about today. And of course, as GroupM and within WPP, with the premise of making advertising more relevant to people and consumers. And my role specifically in that as head of programmatic strategy for Asia Pacific is really in the fortunate position of working with all of our teams and all of our markets to kind of drive the craftsmanship as well as the science of delivering that measurable value to our clients by using data and technology that we'll talk about today. And of course, also advising them on the best use of technology and data to kind of extract the most value from their digital and from their marketing investments. And also, meanwhile, navigating all of the changes in the ecosystem that we're all facing today. So that's kind of how I would describe Xaxis and my role.
Okay, now let's start by getting down to the basics. Can you enlighten us on programmatic strategy in digital advertising today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I like starting just to set the foundation because it's something that does have different levels of understanding. But programmatic advertising in its simplest form is really using automated technology and advertising technology to kind of buy advertising space and digital media. And as in comparison to traditional ways of advertising, where you would traditionally call up publishers or you would call up magazines and ask for insertions in their magazines or on their website, or to manually have banners across some of their news content, where programmatic advertising is an automated enabler of that allows us to do that in an effective way at scale by using data and technology to extract more value and figuring out how do we kind of reach the most valuable customers and consumers of the brands that we're working with.
Give us an example, though, of a brand and a programmatic strategy and how you execute that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very brand dependent because as we'll talk about, there are many different business types and ways of connecting with consumers and customers. And especially now with the acceleration of e-commerce and digital platforms, CPGs as well as FMCGs are of course interested in reaching their consumers across all these different formats and media types like traditional TV as well as video. So when we work with our clients, we look at who are their most valuable customers and their consumers, and then we look at their media consumption behaviors as well as where they're consuming content and news, and of course where they're looking for products and services, and then we use that to inform how we're going to use data and technology to reach those customers, consumers across website and across news publishers and across all the different digital ecosystems that we all are consuming content on a daily basis, such as TikTok as well as YouTube as well as Facebook. So that's really how we would go about working with our clients to develop programmatic strategies.
Okay, now, there's a real cliche right now, which is so common. Data is the new oil.
Yeah,
But there's different types of data, and
of
let's
course.
start at the real basics in terms of can you define first party and zero party data from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, so think kind of how we define it and how, I mean, it's not new terms. I know that they're being discussed and spoken about because of its increasing value, but really zero-party data is kind of defined as what a customer intentionally or proactively would share with the brand. And that can include anything from preferences to purchase intentions, and of course, personal context of just how do we want the brand to recognize us as consumers and customers and individuals. And compared to first-party data, is more defined as data that's collected directly from a brand's audience or customers across the different touch points or interactions that they would have with their consumers, where I would still consider zero-party data as a subset of first-party data, just to make it simpler for everyone. And the difference is just the way that it's being shared by the consumer, where zero-party data is when it's proactively shared because they would want the brand to know something about them and their preferences. Of course, in turn of getting better services and products and value, which I think we all are looking for when we share data with companies and brands.
Now, what are the pros and cons of each type of data?
I mean, I like to see us, I mean, the success is, of course, I think, when you can have a trusted relationship and a value exchange that will encourage your customers and consumers to share data with you, because of course that's the highest level of consent and the willingness for them to share with you because they see that value exchange. But both, I think, are unique in value, and it's all about providing that value exchange, and of course not collecting either zero-party data or first-party data for the sake of collecting it, because I think it's important that it's purpose-driven. Like, you should want to do something with the data to inform better decisions and services and products that will create better value for customers and consumers. So I think kind of when I look at success, it would be when it's not a zero-sum game. Companies and customers should both benefit from the share and the use of first-party and zero-party data. And I really think that it's can be a win-win situation for the company and the business to kind of reduce marketing waste, and of course, hopefully improve the lives of us as customers and consumers by providing better services and products and value.
Now, give us an idea of what success looks like, Daniel. Give us some client examples that are of your clients that are seeing success with zero-party data, for example.
Yes, so I mean, we are really experts at activating our clients' first-party data, and I want to also give some credit to marketers today who are actually becoming more sophisticated at collecting and using and managing data at scale. And I think some of the industries of clients that we've been successful with has traditionally been industries that have always had or have been kind of fortunate to have a very direct relationship with their customers and with their consumers. An example of that is, of course, airlines and travel. And another example could be now financial services and e-commerce businesses who have a very close proximity to clients. And I think what we're seeing today, now that commerce is changing, is, of course, FMCGs and CPGs also trying to figure out how they can connect with their customers and consumers, given that they've always been challenged by the nature of their retail structure and also the where the transaction was happening through their distribution chains. So I think success is really that, and there are many ways that I think a brand and a company can incentivize their customers and consumers to share that data with them.
Now, what are the strategies that brands can incentivize their target audiences to share information voluntarily?
Yeah, and like I really think that I think it's probably like a wrong term to say that the opportunities are endless, but I mean, there is some limitation for some brands, back to my earlier statement about the access to transactions and consumers, but I think that is changing just due to the nature of the growth of e-commerce and, of course, the economy that people are talking about now due to that fact. And if we look at Southeast Asia, and with a population of roughly 583 million, I think was the latest number, with 70% now online, with many of them adopting new shopping behaviors and methods of purchase, social commerce being one, commerce, of course, and e-commerce being the foundation. There are so many different touch points and ways that a brand can incentivize their customers and consumers. And I think some examples that I think have been used by brands and marketers for years have been, you want to provide some sort of a convenience in exchange of sharing that information. That could be notifying you when your favorite item is finally on stock that you've been looking for. And it could also just be when you're a loyal customer and you're sharing your information, you would want to know when there's a deal or some sort of promotion that's relevant to what you're looking for and what type of service that you're interested in. And I think another example is also, I think there's a lot of companies, I think they're trying to figure out now with a high mobile penetration, and also now that there's a lot of mobile app consumption, like is there ways of also encouraging mobile app acquisition, and also encouraging them to share and to engage with the brand on a more regular basis that allows for that data to be shared. And we have a lot of super apps, as they're labeled, in Southeast Asia, which of course provides a variety of services from transport to finance to retail. And there's a lot of information that they are capturing from consumers and customers that they can use to provide better experiences and better services and more relevant advertising as well, which is of course also an element of data. So I think that's really kind of the gist of it.
One of the key things is also, isn't there the emotional aspect of trust with the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's new just because we're discussing data. I think building trust with consumers and customers has always been paramount. And I think that's really important. And I think it was BCG that coined the term, the responsibility imperative. So of course, data is given by customers and consumers in absolute confidence, and there should be that exchange and promise of value. And I think whenever that's breached, that's of course when you start misusing the trust from consumers and customers. And now that there's so many different communication platforms and touch points where information can be shared, it only takes one incident of trust break with a customer to be transparent to hundreds, if not thousands, of other customers. So I think it's really building trust with continuing to honor the consent that a consumer is giving when they share the data, as well as the conditions around the share of the data, what it can be used for, what it can't be used for, and of course always continue to demonstrate the value that we as customers and consumers will get from having shared that data. So I think building trust has been paramount for business and customer relations for the history of time. And I think now it's just more complicated for businesses and companies because they, of course, are fortunate to have thousands and millions of customers connecting with them across both offline as well as online retail touchpoints, which they would need to manage and respect. And that's why I think that's probably the biggest challenge today. And building trust is, of course, paramount to that.
Now, Daniel, that's fundamentally from a trust basis. There are very different views on how individual communities or cultures share data.
Yes.
So for Germany, for example, they're very, very much more reluctant to share personal data. But
Yep.
How are you seeing it in ASEAN? Because we are much more willing to share our personal data, especially if a brand incentivizes us to do so, maybe by giving free downloads or content that is relevant to us. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think retail and shopping behaviors and consumer behaviors will continue to be different from region to region. And I think the acceleration of the mobile penetration and the internet population in Southeast Asia and the ASEAN economy, I think the value exchange is there. And I think everyone is realizing the services and the products and the access that they have to information and to all these different things through the use of data and through the use of technology, and of course the adoption of digital. So I think the value exchange is still there. And of course, when it comes to the use of data and the protection and the privacy concerns, what I'm seeing is that I think ASEAN and Asia Pacific governments and economies are definitely trying to make sure that there's the right regulation and the right protections around consumers and customers. And as business leaders and as companies, I think everyone needs to be educated and informed about that, because as you say, it's different from country to country, but I think there's always some basic principles that you can apply. And I think one of them is you like, don't do it just because you can. And that comes back to the sake of collecting data just because you want more data. I mean, if you have a purpose, like when you started a business or you started a company or you developed a product, if you're applying that principle to the use of data, I think it will be easy to manage that relationship with consumers and customers and make sure that their data is used in a respectful way that can create that value exchange.
Okay, Daniel, in that case, just to recap, what are the top 3 or 4 things that a brand should keep in mind as they build their zero-party data strategy?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you've talked about already is, of course, the building of trust. And I think when we also talked about kind of where does it start and with purpose, I think it starts with setting a strategic goal to kind of prioritize what are the type of data that you as a brand or as a business we want to collect and what is the purpose. And then I think trying to figure out what is then some of the use cases that you can use that data to create value for the customers and for yourself in terms of the extraction of value. And then I think once you have that strategy in place and you realize what consumer and customer touch points do I have, where do I have the opportunity to connect with them and collect data or hopefully build trust for them to share data, then you can be more tactical. And then I think you can start looking at how do you then start increasing or try to encourage customers to share more data. And then also what are some of the technological or data infrastructure you would need to then have in place to be able to store, collect, and make meaning out of that data. Because as again, once you've collected it, and one of the main barriers for companies and businesses is actually fragmented internal data structures, data infrastructures, and technical infrastructures. So of course, that foundation needs to be there once you have a strategy. And then I think the next part is then how do you then enable that data? And that comes with, I think you need to have data and tech talent within the business that can help guide what you can do with the data. And of course, build up the right processes for you to activate and be able to inform better decisions, business decisions, as well as marketing decisions with the use of that data. So I think one is looking at your data infrastructures and tech infrastructures and make sure that you have a great foundation that is streamlined and is connected. And then having people who can be change agents within the business to help educate on the use of data and technology on some of these topics that we're discussing today around data and of course privacy and compliance. And then you would want to then start drawing out some use cases of where you would want to use the data to be able to deliver that value to your customers and consumers that hopefully will keep them loyal to you as a brand and as a business that will then allow you to grow and allow you to further build out your business and your products and services.
So here's the interesting thing. The interesting aspect that you've just mentioned, which people forget about, is internally as a brand, whatever we may be, having the right people who actually understand how to use the data and tools are a fundamental execution strategy.
Yeah, and I mean, and you bring up a very good point. And I mean, at Xaxis and GroupM, like people is our biggest asset. And again, with any transformation agenda and digital transformation, forgetting or neglecting the people component of change and transformation is definitely can be like having a detrimental impact on your overall strategy. So I definitely agree. People and having people that are curious and who are motivated to understand the value that data and tech can bring to a business as well as customers will set a fantastic foundation.
Now, you know, the pandemic has hit us really hard, but in some industries, obviously, it's been transformative, especially in the technology space. Now, tell us how digital habits of consumers in ASEAN have changed since the pandemic hit last year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's still unfolding and changing as
Yes.
we're talking today. So, I mean, we can only take a snapshot, but I mean, it's opened up a new window for, I think, consumers' brand loyalty, and also, which I think is something brands can capitalize from by building a long-term base of loyal consumers, and of course, also encouraging them to share data that would allow them to build stronger and better relationships now that digital habits of consumers are changing and how they're connecting with businesses and brands. And of course, I mean, there's been many kind of studies and many papers on the change of behaviors of consumers and shoppers since the start of the pandemic. And I think one of the interesting ones is there was always this idea that, I mean, the digital economy is growing at a rapid rate in Southeast Asia and in Asia Pacific in general, but someone thought that it might be transient and we go back to normal behaviors. But I mean, I think the reason why McKinsey did that, 94% of the one who tried a new digital service during the pandemic and across India, Indonesia, and China are still planning to continue with those habits once the pandemic hopefully subsides to some degree globally. So I think a lot of these new shopping behaviors are here to stay, and a lot of the new habits. And of course, I think as our CEO always tells us, is change is always a constant, and the only constant is change. So I think brands and companies need to be mindful of that, and that consumer habits will continue to change. But now there seems to be a persistent change that we should be mindful of in terms of the use of e-commerce, social commerce, and curbside pickups, which is also being used now more, right? Especially in Singapore, where I'm based. So I think it just comes down to that. And some of those factors, I think, especially during the pandemic, that have also kept consumers and customers loyal with brands is the one who have really provide some key characteristics, which is value, convenience and availability, and of course, supporting a safe and healthy lifestyle, I think is something that consumers and customers have been looking for brands also, and then just general CSR. But as you say, it's accelerated massively, and I mean, omnichannel shopping will become the new norm also as the pandemic hopefully subsides, and we will kind of be connected with brands and companies both digitally as well as in the offline space and in physical retail, which also, of course, creates new demands on companies and businesses because they have to architect and manage customer relationships across so many different touch points. But I think also another study from last year was that the majority of consumers in APAC are increasingly becoming what they term like omni-channel shoppers as well. So they do still prefer a mix of online and online commerce, and that's something that you should be mindful of, especially when you're building your data strategies, because data, of course, and the addressability of data primarily today functions in a digital sphere, where of course there's also other ways that you would want to be able to understand what your customers look like when they're in physical retail as well.
Daniel, one thing I want to ask you is about social commerce.
Yeah.
China, obviously, it's taken off massively.
Yeah.
But what is that? From what my research has showed me, the takeoff in ASEAN has been mixed. Better in some markets, but very slow in others. Could you enlighten us perhaps on some of aspects of social commerce and streaming commerce and stuff that has been happening in ASEAN?
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I think China as an example, of course, moving at a different rate, and they obviously have a very connected digital ecosystem around many of their services, as well as the social commerce platforms, which are connected with a lot of the communication platforms as well, which makes it such a seamless experience for someone to kind of perform all their daily services and habits. And I think in ASEAN, I think we'll move in that direction at a rapid rate. And of course, what we have a lot of here that we've discussed about is super apps and a lot of apps that performs and provide a lot of different services. And I think increasingly also with Facebook that are connecting communication, of course, also with their social commerce platforms, I think we will start seeing like the interconnection that we're also experiencing in China with a lot of these platforms both providing communication and a way of connecting, as well as giving access to commerce by connecting retailers to their mass distribution that a lot of the social platforms will have in ASEAN as well. So I think ASEAN is definitely moving in a similar direction.
Now, Daniel, what advice would you give companies as they transition more and more of their advertising spend to digital and advertising, especially companies which were perhaps slower to adopt digital advertising before, but now realize they have to play catch up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the good thing about the world we live in. I don't think it's never too late, and different types of advertising in media is valuable to connect with consumers and customers. And of course, digital is increasingly becoming important just by the nature of how consumers and we as individuals are consuming content and the way that we're using services. And of course, during the pandemic, have only had access to content and services and products digitally. So I think as a brand and as a company, I mean, I think it starts with, again, similar to a data strategy. What is your strategy? What does your customer, what do your consumer look like? And then start figuring out, so like, what are their behaviors? What are their interests? What are their passions? What are their media consumption behaviors? What type of content are they interested in? What are they looking for us as a brand to deliver, especially on a lot of the things we discussed? Because building brands is also about empathy, integrity, and of course, delivering value. So you also need to be mindful of that. And then as you transition to digital, I think it's like we talked about, how do you want to connect with consumers and customers? And then start looking at some of the opportunities that a lot of these technologies and a lot of these data types that we've talked about today will allow them to better provide more personalized experiences and services and better advertising that is suitable to them as individuals to be able to deliver better value. And of course, now that a lot of the, especially ASEAN economy, are digital and the majority of the population is online, I think everyone should be mindful that consumers and customers will be using digital as means of connecting with brands and consumers. And if there's ever been like a stereotypical idea that digital is for Gen Zs and Gen X, I think now more than ever, we are more mindful that it's all populations, it's all age groups, it's all industry types, and it's all markets that will have customers and consumers who are very committed to digital and the digital economy.
If I'm a business owner,
yeah,
and I now realize that I have to transition my business more into online, I don't have the people, which we identified as a very important thing.
Yeah.
How does a company like you help me in a short run so that I can then get the right strategy in place and then get the right people then after that?
Yeah, and of course, Xaxis is a part of GroupM and our agencies, MediaCom, Wavemaker, and Mindshare, who represent a lot of our brands, is of course there to consult a lot of our clients and businesses and companies out there who are looking for partners. I mean, should definitely look in their network and look at agencies and marketing partners, as well as consultants who can help them with this transformation going into data technology and digital advertising. And of course, our role is to help clients and brands on that path by giving some guidance on what data and technology can do and how you can use digital advertising to connect with customers and consumers at scale, in a respectful and in a relevant way, and to hopefully extract better business outcomes and more value from marketing and media investments. So I think everything as today starts with companies and brands reaching out to have a conversation with agencies and partners. And then I think being honest about where they are and their state of maturity and what they're looking to achieve. And then at least from us, and I know from many agencies, luckily there are many smart individuals and people out there who can help guide them on that path and give them some strategic guidance and also help them playing catch up. So I think that's where I would start if I was a business owner.
Daniel, any final thoughts before we end this conversation?
Only one thought is, if anything seems overwhelming or incomprehensible, I would always just start simple and start small. As with any transformation, I mean, if you want to make change, you can start somewhere and you can move from that point. So I don't think being overwhelmed by all the jargon and by all the rumbles about data and technology, and even, as you said, data being the new oil, I think be realistic, look at your business, look at your people, and just start simple, and then start using that as a building block and finding partners that can help in that process. Because luckily, none of us are alone, and there are many people who would help us if we reach out. So I think that would be my final advice.
Now, Daniel, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Daniel Henriksen, Head of Outcome Media Planning at Xaxis, on Biztech's Technology Show. This video will be on our Facebook and LinkedIn sites, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.